So, as the title suggests, what we're talking about is how we can engage our alumni in supporting our recruitment, conversion, student progression, student experience. And we're going to run through some of the, I'll just show you the running order now. 1 second. Okay, so what we're going to look at is initially looking at sort of CampusConnect, how we generate stronger communities and how we have kind of developed this approach to generating strong applicant communities and bringing in current student ambassadors. And now we're seeing more alumni engaging in these communities and working with our university partners, how we can engage those and tie into the various kind of global alumni programs that they have running, and to look at kind of engagement that we see and what works and what doesn't work and so on. This process of cultivating community advocacy, which I'll explain, and then we're going to use the UL Global Alumni Program as an example of a program that we've kind of tied into. So it's bringing the community and then tying in the Global Alumni Program, which rewards global alumni for their contribution, not just to CampusConnect, but to other activity, recruitment and admissions activity. Dan's going to lead on a breakout task, which is going to be 10 minutes, and you get a chance to connect with others who are on here today, and just to see what other institutions are doing, look at sort of, good practice in the space, and perhaps sort of compare notes, and then we'll get a little bit of feedback. And then we're going to pick Maria's brain to really sort of tease out some of the considerations. I know some of you sent on some questions about, how to engage alumni, how to reward them, considering how much time, their time is obviously precious, and how we can encourage them to engage with us without sort of overburdening them. So, and then some questions and closing remarks. So it's not going to be too content heavy. We're hoping that it's kind of discursive and lots of sort of chance to ask questions, and with the breakout rooms as well to connect with others. So I hope you find this useful. So we've done our introductions. Myself and Dan from CampusConnect, and delighted Maria can join us today and provide that kind of insight into the alumni community space and how we can engage with them in recruitment conversion. I guess one of the challenges in sort of coming up with this workshop is it's kind of positioned in both the alumni space and obviously for recruitment. So for recruitment, teams, admissions teams, some see it as a kind of an alumni thing. For alumni, they're seeing it as recruitment. So it's kind of bringing these different areas together and thinking about them and how there's kind of mutual benefit for both sides. And we're hoping Maria might be able to help us sort of unpick that a little bit. So just in terms of CampusConnect and what we do is we engage with students typically at the applicant stage or even offer holder stage for maybe international students. And the goal is to bring students together to kind of guide stronger connection, build communities, and we would bring students together around the sort of same program that they're going on to study. Accommodations, a big one for undergrad students, and lots of different kind of interests. And we would have students connecting around things like LGBTQ, mature student groups, students commuting. So generating lots of sort of commonality and helping students find peers around different types of. Now it's delivered with each institution we work with. We have a dedicated community space. So it's a branded, bespoke community. And then once we sort of start the process, we found that with each consecutive cycle, you start with a cohort of applicants, many of whom then would move on to become current student ambassadors through the community. And as I mentioned, now we're seeing more engagement from graduates who have kind of gone from and being part of the community at the applicant stage, progressed into offer current student and continue to engage as graduates and alumni. So for institutions, we find that it's not sort of a transactional type interaction where we're putting applicants together, and then at the end of, once they're enrolled, it's kind of a reset and go again. We're seeing kind of more longer term thinking. So with each cycle, we're building more value and adding more members, because you can imagine as an applicant, if you're joining a community that has students from across the life cycle, there's greater value in terms of the deeper connections, more meaningful kind of connections. And I think that bodes well for everybody across for both the universities, for the students, and generally the communities are more vibrant. An example, we just picked this LGMU example, and I think it was a good one. Emily joined LGMU CampusConnect as an undergrad applicant, and went on to, and as an applicant was very involved in the community, was in a number of different community groups. When Emily enrolled, she then went on to become a current student ambassador on CampusConnect. And then she identified again with lots of different kind of communities across the CampusConnect, and also, the wider kind of LJMU community. Now Emily has graduated, and I guess the question is, how do we continue to engage with Emily as a graduate? She's working with Crown Court as a Crown Court clerk with the Ministry of Justice of the UK, and how can we, she's still part of a lot of these communities, and we find that Emily has engaged with students across the life cycle. She's identified with multiple communities of support, and those communities are the links often that graduates like Emily have retained sort of beyond the university. And I guess the question that we're hoping to sort of kick around today is, how can we continue to engage with Emily? We understand, it's clear the value she provides to the various communities and to the students she engages with, but what's the best model to continue to engage with Emily and to work with the alumni teams as well, and to have that kind of shared ownership, but to really sort of help bring these areas together so there's kind of maximum value. There is, in one case, and I mentioned the UL alumni program. So the University of Limerick is one of our longest partners. So we've built up a significant kind of community of global alumni through the UL Global. And we have tied in with the UL Global program, Global Alumni Program, and Dan perhaps could add into the notes a link to that. So with each cycle, we're retaining these advocates, and then connecting them back into the community so they can connect with offer holders. And through the UL program, it's kind of more formalized. So we've got a way to reward and incentivize students to do, and being able to tie in that has been very helpful in terms of understanding really, the CampusConnect is one part of their role. And I think that has helped motivate the students and reward them. And the example here was a Palestinian graduate who was working, who was went through the CampusConnect community, UL CampusConnect community, and went on to graduate and work. And then we were able to connect back in with an offer holder. And you can see sort of the kind of motivation, this in this case a little bit more intrinsic, as she really enjoyed sort of connecting and helping somebody who was kind of at the beginning of the journey. But I think it really highlights the value that students get. I know the title of this is conversion, but there's value beyond. Obviously conversion is important, but in terms of student experience, in terms of that kind of reassurance that students can provide to each other across the various parts of the life cycle, and being able to tie. Now, for some universities, there isn't a formalized program, and it's not a case that you have to have a program like this, but I think having some way to kind of recognize alumni contribution in this space is really important, and it really helps with the community. There's a way for us to cultivate really strong community advocates, and having some way to actually reward and recognize them, and we'll cover that with Maria, I think is really valuable. So we're going to now, I'm going to pass across to Dan, who's going to lead on the breakout task.
Lovely, thanks Declan. So one of the big benefits of these sessions from the feedback we've had is the chance to meet with people from other institutions and just to compare notes really, chat through what's working and what isn't, and hopefully leave with some practical ideas that you can take forward into your institutional practice around alumni. So the question we're going to look at today: how effectively do your alumni currently engage in your recruitment and conversion activities? So it's a fairly broad topic, but it'll hopefully allow you to input on the thing that kind of is mattering, which matters to your role within the institution. So the things to consider during the 10-minute slot: do you have a formalized approach, or is it more fragmented? So what we're asking there is your alumni's association with recruitment and conversion process driven, centralized, kind of laid out and in a kind of playbook, or is it more kind of ad hoc pockets of good practice, people somewhere doing a really good job and using alumni effectively, whereas others perhaps not so much? And that's kind of a dichotomy, I think, from one extreme to the other. And your institution will likely lie somewhere in the middle, but it would be worth exploring that further with the people in your breakout group. Second question there, also on the first bullet point, an interesting question. How close is the relationship between the alumni office and the wider university community? And just kind of leaning on our client base, we know that this can be really different from place to place. So worth exploring that one too. What activities do your alumni undertake? So think of this from a really practical point of view. What do they do in that really important recruitment phase? And what kind of have you seen that's really effective? It's a really invaluable resource, as we've discussed, and as we'll discuss further with Maria. But they're not time rich in general. So how do you decide where to apply those key interventions from your alumni? And then finally, the sort of $1 million question: do you reward and incentivize your alumni contributions? And have you found an effective way to do that? Okay, so we're going to go into the breakout rooms. We'll have around 10 minutes. Usually we'd have an additional task here of guessing the fictional university. I'm not 100% sure whether we've managed to name those rooms or not, but it doesn't matter. Whatever, if that is the case, then go ahead and do it. So we'll start the breakout rooms now, and we'll see you back here in 10 minutes. One person from each group will be asked to feedback. Welcome back, everybody. I was just getting very embroiled in that chat in the breakout room I was in there. Hopefully you guys have got some value from that. So I'm going to push on because we want to leave plenty of time for Maria's input in the second half of the session today. So we're just going to go through a little bit of feedback. We might not hear from every room, but we'll hopefully hear from most. So if one person could feedback, that'd be really useful. And it's a chance really just to discuss on a wider basis as well. So do feel free to chip in whilst we're going through the feedback. So I'm going to just ask somebody to jump in first. Kathy, you're first on my list, I'm afraid. I wonder if you'd mind feeding back, or perhaps somebody else from your group could, if not yourself, just on what you discussed really, and anything interesting to come out of that discussion.
Charlotte's going to feed back from our group.
Okay, fab.
Hi everyone. So this might be a little bit short, but essentially we were saying that getting alumni more involved is actually kind of more aspirational for us. One of the group had managed to get alumni to be on a panel for their postgraduate event. But for the rest of us, it's something that we kind of want to do a little bit more. I was saying from my perspective from Liverpool John Moores, we're really, really good at getting people engaged all the way through their being a student at the university, but we kind of miss them then if they don't kind of continue on to postgraduate study, and that is because of the way that we reward, which is via uni temps. And actually it kind of results, because a lot of the ambassadors are kind of in postgraduate, we result in kind of getting quite a strong pool of very, very similar ambassadors, which can have its own problems. Whereas kind of with the alumni networks, because international is devolved within our university, they have really, really strong networks, and it's kind of trying to learn from them about what they're doing better than us basically in domestic.
Yeah, and I know from our work with the LGME international team, just through CampusConnect, they have a really strong network of alumni that they can pull in, and it's often quite targeted. Like you say, you might have a lot of a similar type of alumni available, but what you're really looking for is a very specific person sometimes. So I guess it's having that network available to you, but then that comes with challenges as well of keeping them interested over a longer period of time. So totally get that. Thanks for your contributions there. So I'll come to room one next. That's Karen, Lauren and Lee, if one of you guys would like to feedback.
Yeah, perfect. Thank you, Daniel. My name's Lauren Reynolds. I said when I went into the room, they probably got a bit of a dud contributor, considering I'm only in the role 12 weeks now, I think it is. So certainly, I think when Charlotte was saying that the approach is kind of aspirational, that certainly is from my point of view, and I'm an alumni officer with ATU, that's Atlantic Technological University here in Ireland. So absolutely, like it is certainly my ambition to start ground up, to try to cultivate the culture of alumni within the current student body. So then it isn't, I suppose, a very challenging, or that it has less challenges whenever it comes to graduation at that stage. And certainly part of the messaging in the alumni with ATU is inspire. So that's probably to inspire, peer to peer, but also for alumni when they're coming back in to do guest speaking opportunities and things like that, that there is a torch, spotlighted on those, so that again feeds back into cultivating that culture, and trying to, I suppose, put a formalized approach on it with all of those different alumni contributions as well back into the university. Also within my group was Lee from the University of Galway, and Karen as well from UCC, and the feedback from them was from Karen from UCC that this activity falls more within the international office, and they can do it very well. Also, the alumni activities that currently go on organically, I suppose, do help engage recruitment and conversion activities. But again, that formalized process falls within admissions. And then Lee spoke to, again, kind of more in line with me, I suppose, with that aspirational approach and trying to cultivate current students in the current cohorts then, to I suppose activate that formalized approach then on the other end of the graduation, and when they officially leave our university then within their 3 or 4 year academic career. And we didn't talk about the rewards or incentivize, but from my side, it's certainly relying on people from donating their time and talents, and hoping that there's a bit of a CSR element to that as well.
Yeah, absolutely. And I think all of these terms coming up, like cultivating culture and the aspirational approach, it requires a sort of long-term vision, which isn't always the case in our sector. But I think having that and having everybody work towards that and making sure those micro decisions are working towards that goal is probably a good thing to do, but probably quite difficult to implement. But that's really interesting. Thanks, Lauren. Perhaps we could hear from room 2 next. That was Libby, and Maria was also in that room, and Tino.
So we didn't get to the point of saying who will be speaking.
Oh,
Tino,
right.
do you want to? We were too busy talking, and we didn't actually finalise that. Shall I say something? Maria, do you want, who wants to say?
No, go ahead. You go ahead.
Okay, I'll go ahead then. So it's quite interesting in a way, because for Tino and myself are from slightly different perspectives. Mine from the alumni relations side, but integrated within a team that is student recruitment and marketing as well, in a management school of a university.
Yeah.
And Tino from the international student recruitment side. Things we certainly had in common were strong student ambassador networks and use of those for supporting student recruitment activity, and also clearly a good student experience, because we've seen instances of the value of sort of informal alumni referrals, and that kind of word of mouth, or them recommending our institutions because of their own experiences. So that's really good. But then perhaps a bit of a difference on the that sort of next level of alumni, sort of actively engaging alumni. Tino was looking to do that more, but being separate from the alumni team at his institution. Whereas my point of view is, over the years, we've actually engaged alumni quite a lot with particularly applicant conversion activities, whether it's online through groups or with in-person events, and a lot of this particularly on the postgraduate conversion side and overseas, where we think it's of particular value. but within looking to develop it still further, I think we're both interested on the sort of the reward and incentivization of alumni, how to make things a bit more structured perhaps, and to for me certainly it's sort of not just individual instances of alumni supporting this activity, but how to really make it an experience for them that is positive, as it often is, but then leads on to something else and more engagement, and then we can kind of integrate it into other things as well. I'm not sure there's anything else that need adding on to there, but otherwise that's us.
Fab, thank you.
Thank you.
Yeah, really like how you're kind of looking at it holistically like that. And I think the reward, is that one of the R's that Maria is going to cover off? It is. Okay, so hopefully we'll get a bit more input as we get into the latter half of the session on that. So thank you very much for that, Libby. Probably got time for, I'd say, one more group to feedback. I'm not going to pick the group that I was in, Group Ace, although that was fantastic because we reunited Hassan and Brett, who knew each other many years ago. So that was good. Good to get those two in a group together. No problem, Tino. Thanks for joining. So the final room we'll hear from them. Could we go to room 6? In that group, we had Aiko, Ema, and Jenny.
Hi, we also didn't quite get to the point of deciding who was feeding back, so I'll kick off. But Aiko, if you wanted to jump in at any point, please do. We were all from quite different roles. One in student recruitment, I'm in marketing, and Aiko in alumni. So we all had quite different perspectives. We agreed it was quite aspirational. Some of us had more informal ways of connecting with alumni across a range of different things, not just recruitment, but also careers and futures and curriculum contributions as well. So we recognise the value of alumni in a whole range of different ways. We also had different perspectives with University of Limerick not being able to pay and reward alumni, whereas those of us in English settings have got the ability to do that. But we actually got to a quite interesting conversation about if we could, would we? Because a lot of alumni do it because they're really passionate about their community and want to advocate on behalf of the university. So is monetary reward the right thing, or do we use gifting or invites to interesting events and creating different ways to recognise contribution? We agreed that recognising the contribution was important, but how we do that, we didn't quite resolve. What was interesting, I found from the conversation, was a selection process for alumni ambassadors, which I can't remember if it was Ema or Aiko talked about. So not everybody who wants to be an alumni ambassador had the opportunity to be. There was a selection process for it. And we also recognise the different cultures that exist across ambassador programs for student recruitment and ambassador programs for alumni. Often they sit in the same department or the same teams, but actually the approaches and the ways of working are quite quite different in terms of the culture. If I can just quickly add, sorry, I know I'm talking a lot, a couple of interesting examples that people shared was including alumni on webinars to potential applicants, so applicant days and open days, and giving space for alumni to speak or be present at fairs. And Aiko also talked about, in an international setting, hosting a networking event with alumni from Thailand with potential applicants to be able to connect them together and create some value in those kind of connections and conversations. So I think that about covers where we got to in our conversation, but Ema and Aiko do chip in if there's anything I've missed.
That's fab. Thank you very much for that feedback. Really interesting. And I think that that kind of reflects where we're at with our use of alumni through CampusConnect. Often we ask them to do one-off time-limited things rather than an ongoing contribution, which is often really tricky for them. And they've got jobs and all the rest of it to deal with. So no, really interesting. Lots of really good points there to reflect on. Fab, I don't want to take up any more time from the slot with Maria, so I'm going to hand back over now to Declan. Thanks very much for everybody for the feedback.
Super, thanks, Dan. I was getting comfortable there.
Me too.
That was really good. Yeah, pick up lots. Okay, we'll kick on. We'll continue, and we had lots of R's on this one, Maria.
We did, Declan, and
I thought of a few more since.
Yes, and I think I've been dreaming in ours, and the reason is I wanted to be able to, Declan and I had a conversation about how we were going to kind of distill some of the learning, but also, some of the ideas, but also some actions so that people can kind of leave and say, well, what am I going to do next? So we looked at some of these R's that are up there, and I am going to just be really old school here, and I'm going to put up a little. So I don't know if anyone can see that there, but it's pretty small. So I'll go through it, and it goes through the R's that are on there anyway. But what I did was I actually reorganized. There's another R. I reorganized the R's. So I'm going to go through it. So the first one that I had here was around thinking of what we think of as issues, as people that are maybe working in admissions or, working in areas that are looking at conversion. And one of them is the R that's there around risk. And, the solution that I would see that, has been mentioned, but I think can be kind of pulled into an action is the idea of roles. So, the risk is, well, if we get alumni involved, are we going to get the right people involved? Who is going to, how are we going to recruit them? How are we going to select these alumni and things like that? And what I see as a clear action is to have clear alumni role descriptions, which sounds really obvious, but a role description can also be a way to outline what those expectations are. And sometimes there's an importance of having those listed out and having the role, I guess, very, very explicit so that it's clear for you, but it's also clear to the alum. And having a menu, to me, there is an opportunity to send out to alumni and say, here are a bunch of different ways that you can get involved. And it can be, providing a testimonial, click here, to become an ambassador in this kind of way, click here, etc. And so that you're providing options. And, like with fundraising, and as someone who used to be a fundraiser, there's always that mantra, if you don't ask, you don't get. So with alumni, it's exactly the same way. So having clear roles, I think, really helps. The next one down on my list there is about resources and about, everyone saying, oh, what kind of resources do I have? And my, I guess my response to this is around another R. My response is around redefining. So I use the word redefine. And what I mean by that is redefining who is actually involved. So it was exciting to hear. And what I mean by that is internally who's involved in kind of supporting alumni efforts. So you might be interested in having alumni ambassadors in admissions and to help with conversion, etc. And the alumni office is very interested in alumni engagement. So how can you partner so that you're actually diffusing the resources so that there's actually, more of a critical mass working on something, a more collaborative fashion. So there's a real opportunity to think about how that can best be done. And that also then helps to think about the touch points on how alumni can go across the lifespan. And there is a resource that, we can connect to maybe afterwards to people, and it talks about Jessica Vanderlely's across the lifespan, alumni across the lifespan of a student, and how alumni can actually play a touch point across the entire lifespan, and how that means that you have to get other people involved, and it's not just us as the admissions office, and that's a really important component. The other one is about retention. How do we keep people retained? How do we keep them engaged and interested, or how do we get them involved at all if they are indeed have these hectic lives as alumni? And so the word that's been bandied around, and it's up there and both of them are up there, but I'm going to use them in different ways. I'm going to use the word recognition here and the importance of recognition. And I think the single most important underestimated point that we as institutions, or that institutions have to recognize alumni, is our gravitas as institutions. So we forget how important that is for especially young graduates. So if you think about it, if you give them an ambassador type role with a nice role description, and you give them a nice title like alumni leader, alumni ambassador, you're saying that you are actually endorsing that alum as somebody who is a leader in your community. That is a form of recognition in and of itself, and people are attracted to those types of roles. So that's an important role of recognition, and there's ways of augmenting that. I know that Nottingham Trent University uses an alumni fellows program. So once you've done 25 hours of volunteer work, you can become an alumni fellow, which is a really nice and very, holds a lot of gravitas type of title that you can use. There's also the opportunity of things like digital badges that could be linked to a LinkedIn profile, writing reference letters, also highlighting, going back to the roles, highlighting to those alumni, here are the leadership qualities that we're looking for. And that means that that's what they can transfer onto their CV. So what kinds of incentives can you give them to maybe get some additional support from your career services office so that they can start looking at, well, this is the work that I've done as a volunteer, and you get some time with our career services, for example, to help you to to support your CV. And I know some universities have done that so that people can start to see that as a real perk. And finally, the final one is around resistance and resist. So we can kind of have this level of resistance to wanting to get alumni involved because we're also very busy, professionals. And so, we think about, well, our alumni are also very, very busy. So what I put there as the response is two things. One is relatable role models. So that's the R, relatable role models. And the other one is reward. And the reason I wrote that is that we sometimes can get into the rut of taking the same alumni ambassadors and recycle, another R, recycle them over and over. But there is a danger there, and also not providing our offer holders, those that are interested in admission to our institution, that they don't see people who are like themselves. And so having those relatable role models is actually really, and it can be a real inspiration. So how can you kind of, try to identify in a very intentional way people who get involved that could link very nicely with the kinds of students that you're also trying to recruit. And those relatable role models actually also, that's also an incentive. So I know that, I think it was Jenny that mentioned about, the kinds of incentives that we would want for our alumni, and, we pay our students. I'm not aware of many experiences where alumni are paid. Often it is a very much an altruistic, passion-based activity, generous-based activity that alumni get involved. So you can take comfort in that it's not something that's going to, hit the budget line. But what I would say is that you want to make sure that you have meaningful ways that you get involved. And that's the importance of role. So role of you getting your alumni involved. But when they become relatable role model, that becomes, very meaningful. It's like, wow, okay, I can inspire other people who are also like me to study at this university. And it also, when I mean relatable role models, I also mean it in another way about providing that kind of reward. And that also is the rewards of giving back to other alumni who are getting involved in the position, so that you end up having this kind of cycle of alumni who have been involved as alumni leaders, and maybe they've done it for a while, and they can start to mentor and be the relatable role models for your newer alumni who are coming in to actually start to help. So you can have a program where there is some kind of mentorship that's happening there, and some kind of support that can happen within that program. I'm just trying to look through my notes. I have a lot of really lot of notes down here for wanting to talk about this. But really, I would just emphasize the whole idea of, I think we underestimate the kind of social proof that alumni can provide. Current students are fantastic, but the social proof that those that are seeking admission to our institution are looking for is often the social proof of saying, here is some alumni who are doing some really interesting and inspiring things, and we want to get them involved. And it might be getting them involved in once-offs, like send-off events. That could be happening regionally. It could be happening in obviously global centers can sometimes involve the embassy, which also brings a lot of gravitas for your alumni to get the embassy involved if you're having a send-off event, if that's possible. And really, it's just about, that we have this social proof that will help to underline why they want to get involved. But just, I think ad hoc is great, but I do think that having a little bit of formalization and then a little bit of structure will also enable to having a better outcome and indeed better conversion. So I'm open for questions if there's a little time for questions. Is that so? There's a lot of R's there. So but we'll yeah, well, I just thought I'd leave it at that. And then I have a little bit of a challenge after we have maybe a few questions.
Super, thanks, Maria. There was just two things. It's actually another R. which came up
Nice.
in the feedback, was responsibility. I think
Absolutely.
somebody mentioned, where does responsibility lie? And I think we have this problem sometimes as well, the challenge where we have, you know, a potential alumni ambassador here, but, you know, who picks this up, and who sort of, that was one area I think that perhaps, you know, and it varies depending on institution. Someone mentioned that it's kind of part of the ambassador program. So it's the people who are in charge of the ambassadors will look after the kind of alumni champions. Does it sit in the alumni office? Does it sit in the, you know, sometimes it's in careers. So it's a different picture in different places. I mean, any sort of sense of what, I suppose, does it depend on what institution and who's
And
willing to pick
yeah,
it
I
up?
mean, institutions are constantly changing their
Mhm.
you know, where people are sitting. So I think it's really about how you build those relationships, and other are how you're building those relationships within your institution. And, you know, so
Mhm.
one of the challenges I might put out to people is like, you know, when was the last time you had either a virtual or a real cup of coffee with one of your colleagues in one of these other departments that could help
Yeah.
to, you know, bolster your alumni? So it's just, you know, sitting down with your alumni office or your marketing team or admissions or whoever it is, and
Mm.
to just understand that their work and understand them better. And then maybe that's where the responsibility can start percolating to the surface.
Yeah.
And believe it or not, sometimes some of these departments have money that you could then repurpose.
Yeah.
There you go. There's another
Yeah.
R. Repurpose and then reuse
Yeah.
for the purposes of you developing a, you know, an alumni. But if you don't ask, you don't know about it.
Yeah.
So forge those relationships, you know, internally, and that might help you to you know, work and collaborate and cross pollinate.
I guess if it's kind of cross unit as well, it's the value is obviously greater than, for, you know, there's mutual benefit, and it's a, you know, it's a much better approach. The second one, I think that you mentioned this yesterday as well when we were,
Yeah.
was sort of, and it came up, I think, in one of the, it was kind of cultivating a culture of, you know, and it's something maybe we've looked at as well, is to, which goes back to the risk as well, but kind of identifying or promoting or cultivating a community of kind of alumni and advocacy sort of earlier than sort of, you know, they've gone now, we want to try and pull them back in to engage with these guys as but to sort of start the process earlier. And that probably is, again, another cross unit kind of function where we need to think about engaging other parts. But I know we discussed this yesterday briefly, but what's your take on that sort of?
So, I mean, one of the practical things that can be done is most universities now, especially across the UK and Ireland, which seems to be who's on our call today, is most of them have, there's an alumni database that exists. So when you are in your admissions office and you have some amazing current student volunteers, figure out a way that you can make sure that they get tagged on their alumni record, so that later on when you're looking for them or you're gone or somebody else is there, they are able to find people who have been involved in those types of roles. And that makes it a lot easier for later down the line to find those kind of people. So that is, you know, one way to kind of think about you know, cultivating. The other thing is, you know, we sometimes skip a lot of steps, and we have to kind of cultivate that kind of level of affinity and love for our institutions first. So we can't just all of a sudden ask them to all become ambassadors. They have to want to become ambassadors, which sounds like a really, you know, natural thing. But we, you know, so we have to think about who our partners are, who are helping to cultivate that kind of feeling and the pride, and, you know, also just, you know, demonstrating. That's where things like your alumni magazine or your communications that you're doing on social about, you know, what kinds of things are you doing? What kinds of things are you doing around alumni admissions? Are you really proud of that you can then communicate out to the masses? Your alumni start hearing this, and then you put out the call saying, actually, we'd love to get you involved. Come to a send-off event. You know, come to this webinar. We're looking for panel members. Put out those calls out there. We're looking for testimonials. And then they've already kind of understand the kinds of things that you've done, so that it's not just coming out of the air, and they can see the connection to something that's bigger than them and exciting. So I think that's what you know, people want to be involved in things that are like winners, right? So if what you're doing is really, you're really proud of what you're doing in your admissions office, go and sell it, go and, you know, promote it, and then your alumni will want to be involved.
Super. I could keep asking questions, but I'm going to pass it across to the floor as we're almost out of time. We'll just open it up to anyone who wants to jump in and ask some questions. Maybe
Don't be shy.
everything. We
And-
haven't covered everything, have we?
I guess I at this stage, while people are
Oh.
percolating for a question, I just make a quick just think to yourself, as this is kind of like a workshop scenario, is think about, what is the thing you're going to do immediately after this session so that you're getting like value from this hour that you've invested of your time. So whether that's like, I've thought of a whole bunch of ideas and I'm going to look them up, I'm going to go on LinkedIn and connect with somebody that's on this call. What's that thing that you're going to make sure that there's actions that come out of this? So you can pretend that this, instead of this just being an hour, it's an hour and 15 minutes, and take those extra 15 minutes to do the actions that are related to the session. So
I see.
that will maximize its effect.
Yeah, Hassan has a question here. How do we
Yeah, go
ensure
ahead, Hassan.
continuity?
Great. Hold on, I'll look in the.
We got that one.
How do we ensure continuity? Ooh, and I guess, what do you mean by continuity? Is it continuity with the alumni that are involved? Continuity, what do you, Hassan, do you want to elaborate for us?
Yes.
Great.
Thank you, Maria. This is very interesting hearing and talking to you. So what I was referring to is that the continuous engagement can be challenging at times, no? Like perhaps some of them will support us with one event, but then after a while they're like, oh, not them again.
Yeah.
So that continuity of it, like I think because all of us have, perhaps even including me, have short span or perhaps short interest cycle, then how do we then invest all these resources and then get little out of it? And so that's what I was referring to by continuity.
And that's a tough one, because like you said, some people only can give to maybe coming to one event, right? So it is like, and I guess part I guess there's two parts to the answer. One is to ensure that if people are going to these events and you're in admissions, for example, and you have alumni who are getting engaged and involved, make sure that your alumni office knows that engagement is happening, so that it can be tagged on their record, on that individual's record. Because later on, maybe right now and maybe in 2 or 3 years time, they're still not interested, but you can always go back. They've tagged themselves as someone who's interested in this type of work, so that you can kind of start to engage. Now, there's some universities and what they do across North America, and they would have like these special groups of people that have anybody who's done any kind of ambassadorship type work, and they send them targeted emails, and they send them there's a more targeted approach to how they connect with those people. So maybe there's something there about making sure that they're tagged appropriately so that you can send targeted messages to them. So when they are interested, that will allow for some continuity. But the others is about the roles again. And, if we have role descriptions, this isn't just something like, even when you're doing, a job, that's a job for a certain definitive length of time. And I would say the same for a volunteer role. So you want to say to someone, if you're going to take on this role, we hope a commitment of 1 year. And at least that's showing some level of continuity, 1 academic year, maybe it's 2 academic years, and then it can be reviewed or something like that. That gives you an out, but it also gives them an out. And it also shows the level of commitment that you're expecting. And I think that also helps with a little bit of continuity. And maybe after that length of time is showing levels of recognition, and see if your alumni office has awards or other types of recognition that you might not be aware of, that you can that can help to incentivize them to stay on for for a bit longer. But it can be a tough one. But I think keeping them involved in a special group is one way to kind of keep them warm as you go through your work.
Okay, great. Thank you, Maria. And I guess also one of the things that I wanted to also highlight was, when Brett and I were talking, is that fostering that good relationship with your current students. It all depends on the relationship that you have with them and how much they want to give, and that you've built over. And it's more than transactional.
Absolutely.
And I think it's more about people relationship and that bond that we have built with the students and that they have with us and the university, I think.
I always say to people, these students are alum from the day that they start. So they're alum from day one. So if we think of them like that, that's a really powerful way of us. And if we can get them, like you said, fostering those really positive relationships, and also maybe letting them know, here are some opportunities that you'll have when you're alumni. Here's a menu of things of how you can get involved. That might start to, break the ice to make it much easier when they actually do become graduates. Aiko, do you have a question?
Yes, I'm interested. Yeah, I really like the idea of relatable role model as like using alumni, but I was wondering if you have any advice on how we recruit them, because sometimes when we open up the opportunities, those who raise hands may not be the ones that we are looking for. So
yeah, that's a really, and I think it goes back to maybe what I just commented there. There's two things. One, the way I commented this there to Hassan. So it's like, how do we connect with our students, our current students, and maybe with student societies or student groups, to let them know that we will be looking, or that we're looking for alumni, or looking for, student ambassadors turned alumni ambassadors. Don't forget our students also stay informally connected often with alumni. So if you mention to, let's say you're looking for, I don't know, Indian or Nigerian or alumni that are first in family, you can contact maybe some student societies that might be able to help to start to find some of these relatable role models. The other one is if your university has any mentorship programs. It's a really nice way. People who have decided to mentor might also be interested later on in actually wanting to, this is another form of mentorship in some ways. And we forget that, when we're inspiring others to have a transformational experience like education, that's a form of mentorship. So we can maybe look at, well, what kind of mentorship programs are involved that involve alumni, and maybe target some of those particular alumni. And maybe put out a call that is very specific. We're looking for people from, we're welcome to all ambassadors, but we're specifically looking for maybe, some people who meet certain groups. I don't think that there's anything wrong with saying that you're looking for people who are in targeted countries, for example, because at the end of the day, those people from the same countries will, they will resonate with people that are from the same, regions as them, same places as them. They can ask questions, more readily. So hope that helps a little bit.
I think that's a good point. I think we'd echo that the applicants that we build kind of relationships with go on to make the best ambassadors. The ambassadors that we have a relationship with and that continue to engage the communities go on to make the best kind of alumni. So it is a kind of a longer term play. Instead of, going out looking for people, you're embedding it early in terms of the student life cycle and planning ahead, sort of securing a kind of future value that you're going to have down the road. So I think I'd echo that. Conscious of the time, we've run over a little bit, but there's loads of questions. I'm going to pass across to Dan, who's going to finish up. But if anyone has any questions, Dan, you can.
No, I think that's it. We're impinging on people's
Yes.
lunch even more than we were now, so probably we'll have to wrap up. But just want to say a huge thank you to everybody for attending today. Very nice spending an hour with you this morning. And also a huge thank you to Maria. Thank you for joining us.
Maria.
Thanks for sharing your expertise and experience.
My
Where's
pleasure.
the best place for people to contact you if they have further questions?
Well, they can, you can find me on LinkedIn, obviously, we're all connected, and I'm always happy to connect with people. I also have my book that you can find, the Alumni Way, Building Lifelong Value from Your University Investment. And you can find that with Policy Press. And so we can, send out a wee link there to people.
Yeah, we'll do that. Yeah.
That's great. Yeah. And so that's how you can connect with me there too, with my book.
Super. Great. Thank you, everyone. And hope to catch up with everyone soon.
Have a great week, everybody.
Thanks, everyone.
Thanks for joining us.
Thank you. Bye now.